here we are.
Here we are.
10 years.
Certainly is.
Stirling based.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, brother and sister.
Yep.
Unusual to say the least, but we'll come back to that later. So, 10 years on, how did this come about?
Well, it's rather a long story, as it happens.
We've got 23 minutes.
We do. Julie and I both come from wildly different professional backgrounds, and we really wanted to have a family business. So long conversations were had about what kind of shape that business might take. What could we do that would, be the kind of business where our skills would complement each other rather than clash. And after a long while, publishing seemed to emerge as being the popular choice, partly because I had worked in and around the publishing industry for a good few years prior to us setting up business, but also because Julie has a really broad range of marketing and publicity skills that she had developed over a variety of previous roles, both in commercial business and also in the third sector. So really it was an attempt to sort of fuse those two different things together into something that we thought would work.
I think as well, the one thing that we do share together is a real love and a passion for reading. Something that was, from the minute that we sort of were able to read, and the common school that was 3, we had to find something to read. There's usually a rush in the morning to get the newspaper to see who's going to get there first for the breakfast, things like that. So it's not that
It's not
much
true
of
in
a
every
jump.
household.
So it's. I guess that played a big part in it as well, and our passion for reading and just wanting to make a difference as well.
Yeah. I seem to be hearing it was a conscious choice. Most people who fell into something and then became very, very good at it. You're saying it was a conscious choice?
I think so. I think mainly because when we're looking at the things to do, Tom was producing books for other publishers at that particular point in time, and they were saying things like, can you generate an index? Can you do this? Can you do that? And that's one of these things where a light bulb comes on and said to Tom, why are we not just doing this?
Yeah.
Why don't we just do that together? And you've got all those skills that for like the proofreading and things like that, where I had a certain set of skills when it came to speaking to people, sales, things like that. So it marries well together, and we know each other quite well. Funnily enough.
Yeah.
So that helped, to because we knew we could trust each other as far as that was concerned.
Yeah, well, trust's just very important in life, and particularly so in business. I would have thought so. That in terms of, is there any secret sauce? I guess you've covered a lot of things there. What would you say were the top 3 things that have contributed to your success?
I think how we treat people is something to do with that. I think that, we specialised in, maybe not initially, but the way it worked out and the way we feel comfortable with it is about supporting first-time authors and, dare we say, maybe authors who are coming to writing maybe a little bit later in life. So it means that a lot of places perhaps wouldn't have the time to spend on our new authors and building up their confidence and absolutely telling, of course you've got a story in you. I think that played a big part, don't you?
Yes, it did, and I think because publishing often has a reputation, not necessarily unfairly deserved, for being quite hard-nosed, and people getting scathing rejection letters and things like that. And we knew that's not how we wanted to be. I mean, certainly having been a writer before I was a publisher, I really felt it was very important that respect was going to be there for new writers, for established writers, because that's how you get the best out of people. That's how the best ideas are developed, when people feel comfortable and they're happy to exchange ideas. And I think, that's absolutely right. I think that, it's so important to treat people well.
Mm-hmm. I think our secret sauce probably is hard work and being flexible and looking at, where the analogy we use quite a lot is because we are small, small is beautiful in the respect of, if you see things that you want to do or try different things, we're not as tied in as perhaps some of the bigger publishers are to having certain publishing schedules, things like that. So we can turn our boat around a lot quicker than the big ocean liners.
Have you had much business where an author who you've treated well in the manner you've just described, then introduces you to other authors and brings them to you. I would imagine if you're good to people, then they recommend you to other people. So, has that been significant for you?
A lot of our authors are if you look at our back catalogue, a lot of them have come to us time and time again. Because there again, we built that relationship because we're a family business, because Extremis is Tom and I. They know that when they lift the phone, they're going to get one of us.
Yeah.
They know that they can tell us pretty much anything. We've probably got to know a lot of secrets that maybe families don't even know, because we've built up that rapport, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's played a big part. They keep on coming back, and yes, you're absolutely right. They do recommend other people as well.
Yeah. That's good. It makes life easier if people come to you and you don't have to go and find them. It's true in every business. So, 10 years has been a lot of change in your industry. The biggest probably the introduction of digital publishing. As a technologist in my past, the difference between digital and analogue, but I think analogue's hardly an appropriate word for your industry, but what's been the major change to digital publishing from the more traditional publishing?
Well, it's been a long road for digital publishing in a way, because I think it started in a kind of nascent state in the late 80s, but it's not really been sort of for the last 10, 15 years that it's become really, really dynamic and well positioned to use as a business model. And from that point of view, for us, it's been great, because we're in a situation now where there is so much more you can do in terms of multimedia strategies and sort of transmedia publicity strategies. So that's made a huge difference, because the odd thing about book publishing is a lot of it, particularly when it comes to the bureaucracy, has largely been unchanged for a very long time. And we've had this opportunity now to try and harness the new digital techniques when it comes to distribution, and in particular in terms of finding an audience abroad for our books, which really is something that has come of age in the last few years, and it's made it much easier and more exciting actually for us to help get the word out about new titles, because publishing actually has more new product introductions than any other industry. So you really want to make sure that you're making as much of an impact as you can, not just for the sake of the company, but also for the sake of the author who's produced that book, to make sure that it's noticed and that people are aware that the book is there.
Is it made marketing easier?
Well, it has and it hasn't. I mean, I think it's made it more straightforward, because things like social media, for instance, help you to get the word out in a very immediate way that perhaps print advertising doesn't necessarily. It's also cheaper. But
everybody's at it.
That's
so you've got to differentiate yourself.
That's exactly it. That's a major challenge about it, is the fact that it is so much more difficult to gain traction now. So you have to be very aware of your audience and how best to get those books out there.
Yeah.
And you have proved to be good at it, because you've won numerous awards. So is there a common strand across these awards?
I think innovation seems to be the common strand, and we're really pleased about that, because if there's one thing that we pride ourselves on, it's about being adaptable and about trying new things. I mean, when we started, we didn't imagine we were going to do nearly as much in the way of video that we've been doing. Who would have thought in 2018 we would have started a podcast, and yet we've never missed a month so far, and touch wood, we hope to continue with that.
After this one, it'll go down real rapidly, I'm sure.
But as Tom's right, I mean, even during the pandemic when we were locked down, thankfully we had some in store, but I think the funniest thing was we were discussing a Christmas book and we were recording it, I think around about September, October time, and we were sitting outside in the garden, obviously socially distanced to be at the recording, and here we are sitting next to this roaring fire. I could hear the ambulance flying past with the sirens going, and the birds tweeting, and
you could have been in New York.
Well, absolutely. So yes, absolutely. There's all these fun things which we kind of embraced from the get-go, didn't we? Putting things on YouTube, author videos,
audiobooks and Genie as well.
Audiobooks and Genie, all these different things, just to try and give people something a little bit different. Although what we do in some sense is actually quite traditional, in the fact that it's real books that we bring out of the paper variety. we still think people are inherently interested in what authors do and what people do, and kind of behind the scenes in what we do as well. We've certainly found that, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of places just won't discuss anything like that. But
Yeah. It's that kind of industry,
Yeah.
I think, that people do play their cards very close to their chest. So things like sales figures are quite hard to come by, but that's exciting too, because often people will ask me, how do you get the edge on your competitors? Well, the reality is, when a book comes out, that book's been in development for about a year to a year and a half beforehand. So really, there's no point in trying to guess what other people are doing, because if you see a bandwagon, it's too late to jump on it.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it's so important, I think, to diversify, to try and find out what stories are genuinely going to interest people. And that's the beauty of non-fiction, I guess, is the fact that real life is always stranger than fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So that's certainly given us a very broad canvas to work on.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we chose to go down the route of non-fiction, was because of that. There was so many different avenues we could take it.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that when we made the decision 10 years ago to do that, that was one of the major things of. And you kind of go, you look at some of these manuscripts and you go, seriously? That if someone was to make that into film, you would say it's far too far-fetched.
Yeah.
But we know the people who've done it, and you kind of go, no, that's real enough. That actually did happen to them. So yes, it's always been interesting. No 2 days are ever the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
That's
certainly
fair to
true.
say.
So, Thomas, a question mainly directed at you, but maybe it's for Julie as well. Writing or publishing?
Two very different things, absolutely. I mean, I tend to say, if you write fiction, it's completely different from writing non-fiction. The amount of research and the nature of that research, totally different between the two different disciplines. And writing and publishing is much the same, I think. I mean, both of them are really fascinating subjects. But in terms of what's involved, certainly in the case of publishing, so much of it is relying on a knowledge of business and of legislation and of the changing nature of regulations, whereas good writing never goes out of date. People are always watching carefully to see where the trends are.
Yeah.
And certainly from our point of view, we're always considering what our reader is going to be interested in, what's likely to gain traction. There are so many different aspects to consider.
I think you've both proven you've got a feel for that, but what about you, Julie? Have you got a book in you?
Well, I've got up with one or two things with Tom already, like the Heart 200 and Secrets and Mysteries, the Heart 200. And yes, watch the space. There might be something coming up towards the end of this year. But
That's exciting.
Yeah, tell you. But for me, one of the things I wanted to do, and we waited until our 10th anniversary to do it, was we're bringing out a new newsletter. So this is something brand new for us, and it's going to be called Extremis, etc. So a little bit about our podcasts and our books, not surprisingly, events and everything else that we're up to. So that's if this is born on the back of my love of comics as a child, magazines as a slightly older child, and just thought it was something that we didn't have, and people were asking about because they wanted to know more about it. When Tom does his college course at Forth Valley College, it's one of these things people want to know more about it and how we do the things that we do. So I'd like to think that we're quite human and approachable for people to ask that, and that's one of the things you get feedback on all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, because it's very, very interesting. It's never the same course twice. Every time I do it, it's slightly different, and you get a feel from the individual students as to what interests them and what concerns them in terms of the publishing industry and how things are changing. That might be because of AI. And all the different applications of that. It may be economic in terms of the odds of getting your first book out there, and it may well be, of course, the different modes of publishing, because of course there are so many different ways for people to get into print now, and that's an exciting thing, because there's never really been a better time to be involved in publishing than there is now.
You mentioned AI, and I've been in the paper recently about students becoming under suspicion by using AI to produce what should be authentic work. Is that a concern for you?
Well, it's a big concern for us because AI at the moment is not always particularly accurate, and the more niche the subject, certainly the more niche the knowledge that is required of it to dredge up. So consequently, you tend to find that there's a lot of inaccuracy. There's also, of course, a huge plagiarism issue, because it depends on subject to subject. So for that reason, assistive AI is very popular. People use it a lot for grammar and for readability. But generative AI, at least at the moment, causes all sorts of legal headaches. And a lot of publishers, as a result, are aware of the fact that it's not going to go away. But the real issue, I imagine that much the same way as the education sector, having to consider going back to closed book exams, it's the same idea. I mean, we're going to have to live with it. The question is, what form is that cooperation going to take?
Mm-hmm. And there again, I guess it boils down to us knowing our authors as well. So it's about having the discussion with them. Because they know as part of the contract that this can't be AI.
Mm-hmm.
So if something comes back up to us, then we're flagging it back to them and saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But I can honestly say that's never happened because we know them. There's conversations had with them.
Mm-hmm.
They know the score. And I think they're far too sensible to do that anyway.
To what extent do the large publishers, you say you operate in non-fiction, to what extent do the large publishers kind of lead the way on positive and negative trends? Or does the innovation come from the small and nimble guys like yourself?
Well, it's a tough one. I mean, from our point of view, it's a bit like being in a speedboat alongside an ocean liner. It makes it very, very easy and convenient if we need to make a sudden change in course, as we have done in the past. Say, for instance, if a book that you're expecting to arrive at a certain time doesn't, the manuscript, for whatever reason, is unable to arrive in time, you're able to make changes in your schedule and sort of course correct. And certainly that, I think, is probably true of the broader industry, because who's setting the trends? Well, it depends on who you ask. Some of these huge multinational publishing companies, for instance, are increasingly interested in celebrity authors where the name is what's selling the book. So you're not selling a cookery book, you're selling such and such a famous TV chef's cookery book. You're not selling a biography, you're selling a reality TV star's biography. And there is an element of the celebrity driving the sales, plus of course these books will appear in places like supermarkets where they're heavily discounted by the wholesalers. What we are able to do is find stories that might otherwise fall through the cracks, the sort of thing that might never get to the really big international companies, and we're able to lavish as much time and care and attention on those books as possible to work with the authors and make sure that they're as happy as possible with the product that they receive.
Mm-hmm. You won the Publisher of the Year award in 2024 for innovations and excellence. So is that kind of what you're talking about there? Is it easier for a small publisher to innovate than a large one? And how do you sustain excellence?
Well, it's easier, I think, in the sense of being able to implement changes quickly. If something new comes along, then we're able to kind of hitch that alongside what we already do, and make sure that we're able to develop it. And of course, you're always learning. I mean, that's the beauty of the job. There's always new techniques. There are always new developments to take into account. So that's the exciting part of the job. That's why I wouldn't do any other job, actually, is the fact that no 2 days, as Julie says, are ever the same. This is what's given us the opportunity in recent years to branch into spoken word and audiobooks alongside the podcast and the video presentations as well. Because I think more and more now people do expect to be able to relate to the authors. They want to see more of them, the people who are behind the books. And from our point of view, that's really important that we give authors that opportunity.
Did they recognise that?
I think
if
so.
If they've used a larger publisher in the past, and then what sort of feedback do you get in terms of how you bring something to the marketplace and the experience for a new writer?
I think that's certainly true. I mean, people that we've spoken to who've worked previously with larger companies, in particular sort of multinational companies, tends to be that they've been through a kind of conveyor belt. And a lot of them feel a bit of dissatisfaction because once a book has gone through a particular phase of editing or of presentation work or design work or whatever, that they kind of feel perhaps that they're a bit detached detached from the final product. Whereas in our case, if someone calls us up, they know that they'll get either Julie or myself on the phone, and they're much more likely, I think, in terms of the feedback we've received, to feel that they have a connection with their book, that they don't feel it's ever taken away from them. And that if we make suggestions about what they might want to do with it, they don't necessarily need to follow those suggestions. It's very much a collaborative process in terms of the kind of the final book that comes out.
And sometimes we get the best out of people because of the fact that they maybe went through, everybody says they've got a book in them, but for some people, they go, I don't know if that's for me. But one or two people, it's a case of, yeah, we really do think you have a book in you, and we like to write it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not just about what's written, it's about the confidence that you instill within the author to actually make them think, yes, I really can do this. And especially when we had a situation that maybe haven't felt quite so comfortable with. So, or it's brand new to them. Because then obviously you're talking all the way through about how we do it. As far as that's concerned. But harking back to the innovation aspects of it, part of the reason for going down the road of the digital publishing was also because of the fact that digital means that we can produce as many books or as few books as are required. So if a small shop only needs 1 or 2 books, we're not pressurising them into buying a lot of books. We're also not sitting with a lot of books in a pallet sitting somewhere waiting for it to go out to somewhere. So there's only the same amount as actually published as actually required. So there's no waste, or very little waste. We're not sending hundreds of books to landfill, hundreds of books to get pulped, and that was really important to us as well. It wasn't just the finished quality, which obviously was very important, because if you've got a book, you want it to look at its absolute best. But also the fact that at some point, if the books didn't sell, because people obviously at the moment are struggling financially and things like that maybe don't make the number of sales you thought you were, then what do you do with the extra books? You're going to pulp them. It's a waste then. It's a waste of environment.
Some practical elements as well.
Massively practical and almost ethically, environmentally, that you're looking after the planet as well to be able to do that. There's a lot of argument. A lot of people say, so how come if it's digital, why don't you just do audiobooks and e-books and things like that? For the simple reason that, I don't know what the percentage is, Tom will be able to tell us, no doubt, that
I'm sure.
I'm sure he will, that if you read something, it sticks in your brain far more, isn't it?
70% more likely if you read something off a page than if you read it off a screen. And the studies vary. You check out Google Scholar if you doubt me. But the general feeling is that your brain apparently is trained to dispose of information more quickly if it's reading it off a screen, because obviously that's where your social media and news feeds come from, and you get a lot of information, so your brain is constantly sifting through it. But it shifts to a different mode if you're reading off a printed page, and consequently people are more likely to retain that information.
It's interesting because I spent my career in sales and sales management broadly in the tech industry for since the late 70s, and leadership gets more and more important as you appreciate what it means and how it's delivered, and you've just explained a lot of qualities that any leader needs to demonstrate. This semblance of control, setting of example, coaching, etc., which all gets pulled together into your industry in terms of who you work with, as well as the writers and the authors in particular. So yes. So brother and sister, there's not many people I can think of. 1 or 2 examples, but not in your industry. So it sounds like what you've said so far is only going to get stronger going forward as you cover more ground in terms of breadth and depth.
I hope so. I think it works for us because of a little bit of an age gap, and I think it works for us as well because our skills are so different. But there was also an understanding when we first started, and the fact that there had to be give and take, as in any business partnership, and partnerships in general, had to be give and take as to what we're going to do. We don't agree on everything, because nobody ever does. But eventually we come to a point where there's something mutually that goes, right, let's go for that then. Let's take that journey. Or we just agree to disagree.
Yeah,
as far as that's concerned, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, as Hegel always said, there's thesis and there's antithesis, and there is always a synthesis. Yeah. And it's to try and find that middle ground that's the important part, to make sure that both of us effectively are working together to find the best sort of common cause.
I think as well it still works for us as brother and sister because we're both still so excited about what we do. 10 years down the line, we still get that buzz when the next book comes out. When you get the check copy to see what this one's going to look like, that's never gone. That's still there. And that all the hard work that you've done with an author, maybe someone that we've worked with quite a few times, maybe somebody brand new, maybe a different format we've used this time. We still get that buzz. There's still that's great, I love that, or I like this one better than this one. And so there's it's, as Tom says, every day's a school day. Every day is something new. There's something to learn, and that's what I love about it, and that's what makes me come back to it time and again. Even when like everything else, everybody's got something that's something happens. It's not a perfect business. There are things crop up like every other business ever does, but. We love. Well, I certainly love what I do. And I think.
Well, that's key, of course. Yeah,
and I think people see that, Tessa, that you've got an obvious passion for what you do. Yeah.
So, as you start your 11th year, you mentioned earlier what you've got planned to celebrate the 10th year. Well, when can we start seeing, and what are we going to see over the next few weeks to kick off and publicise Extremis in their second decade?
Well, you need to read Extremis, etc. You need to subscribe to that and find out what we're getting up to. So we'll talk a little bit about our podcast. It's very much a case of, what are they up to now? I think would probably be the subtitle for that one, as far as that's concerned. So there's lots of different things in the pipeline. There's more. Tom's going back to college again in February.
Well, this will be the 6th run of courses for writing for publication. So there'll be a whole new raft of students coming in looking to find out what's happening in the publishing industry today. So I hope to give them some new insights into the various things that are happening, in the hope that I can encourage them in their own writing journey.
Do you tend to see your audience for that to be people with experience in the publishing industry, or students and youngsters?
It's right across the board. I've had people as young as about 18 and people in the mid-70s. And that's ranging from people who are interested in just finding out more about the industry, to people who have a manuscript in their drawer that they want to do something with, to people who perhaps have already established themselves as an author, but are looking for different ideas, sort of hybrid publishing perhaps, those kind of things.
I think COVID changed a lot of things for people. A lot of people, when I have a chat with them, obviously because I'm there with Tom, and have a chat when he's not lecturing, just get to know people, and it's, they'll say, well, it wasn't until I had the time actually during COVID when everything stopped, and I thought about it, but I've been so busy all the different times, and right now is the time for me to formulate this idea, to actually do something about it. And a lot of people have come to us that way, and sort of said, I've never done this before, but I've got this manuscript, so what do I do? So that's kind of where we come into, even if it's obviously not suitable for us because it's fiction, for example, but it's still about giving people the courage and the tools to approach different places to potentially take the book forward.
Yeah, and that's been an interesting thing, because what's jumped out at me from the college course has been the number of students who keep in contact, often long after the course is finished, where you get an email from them saying, how would you suggest I would do this, and what would you recommend about that? And I think that says a great deal about just how volatile the publishing industry is just now, how febrile, and how much of a tendency there is for new approaches to establish themselves, which is, just to build on what I said earlier, a good reason why it's just such an exciting industry to work in just now.
In 3 months' time, we've got bloody Scotland here, and Stirling's going to be full of publishers and writers in a particular genre. Do you ever go along and sit and observe how other publishers work in an environment like that, whether it be in the Albert Halls or elsewhere? What do you learn from that? I'm sure you've done that in the past, so tell us a bit about that. That'd be
Yeah. Well, everyone loves bloody Scotland. You know, it's been a huge success year on year, and a very surreal thing if you're walking through Stirling city centre and you're passing all of these renowned crime authors, some of whom have been in their job for years and years and years. So to rub shoulders with them, even just momentarily in public, is quite something. But Stirling itself is a publishing city. I mean, it has a very, very long publishing heritage. And people remember people like Dougal Graham, people remember N.A.S. Mackay, all of these big names of Stirling's publishing yesteryear. So, I mean, if we could even be a footnote in that long history, then I think we're doing okay. Because at one point, Stirling was to book publishing kind of what Dundee was to journalism, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we do enjoy that aspect. And of course, it's always a pleasure to speak to people who run their own publishing company too, or are representatives of publishing companies, because it's amazing how many people have different approaches, their view of the industry might be different. I think there's so much we can all learn from each other.
Yeah.
I think
it's quite nice sometimes just to be the observer and to be the
person.
Yeah,
that's what I meant. You're relaxed.
And you sit in the... we did that last year, sitting amongst the audience and chat to people and hearing about all the different things that they're doing. And you're a publisher too. That's really interesting. Yeah. So it's lovely just to be able to just be a part of it, if you know what I mean. Just get the buzz from it and the feel from it, and the whole city just comes to life when it does start. And as Tom said that,
one of the things that they do in bloody Scotland kind of reminded me of what Tom mentioned to us a couple of months ago when you were on about. Of filming material from real scenes in real TV and film productions in and around Stirling. Certainly far more than I'd ever thought there were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a huge eye-opener for me when I started researching the subject, but that's led to a couple of talks, one at the Holyrood, one at Legends at the Monument, and then later in July doing a guided walk around Stirling Old Town, where I'm going to be talking about some of the different filming locations up there, because it's an absolute smorgasbord of different film styles. I mean, you would automatically assume because Stirling's architecture has been so well preserved, historically, that many of these films would be historical dramas, and indeed there are many in that genre. But then there are sci-fi films, fantasy films, comedies. There have been overseas productions that have been filmed here. So there are lots and lots of different things that have showcased Stirling and used it as a backdrop.
Well, that's one aspect of Stirling's role in your career. Are there any others? Apart from the fact you live here?
Well, it's a great place to be, actually. I mean, there's a great creative vibe in Stirling. There's lots and lots of different creative people working here in totally different modes of creativity. But beyond that, of course, it's a really, really central location. You're perfectly placed here for Glasgow, for Edinburgh, for Dundee, and there are so much going on in all of these respective places. So it really is sort of Scotland's beating heart when it comes to, the arts, humanities and creativity generally. So for that reason, it's great to be here because it is never a dull moment.
Yeah, and it's true what they say about being the gateway to the Highlands as well, because we see so many lovely people who come through, and it was lovely to research some of our books like the Heart 200, where basically, just as we became tourists and went to the castle and did things like that, and then walked down to chat to people and hear the conversations, different languages and stuff like that. And that's, I think, just one of the things that makes it such a vibrant place to be, especially when we can kind of pull ourselves out of that just momentarily, just love to actually recognise the place for what it brings to the place, and I think that's something else that, as Tom mentioned, all these interesting people that we now know through business and various activities and things we've done. It just helps to bring something more to the table, I think. And it also means that it's another exciting part of the partnerships that we can get involved in, because we're flexible in the things that we can do. So it's not just about producing books, nothing wrong with that, but there's that, and the podcast like we are today, and things like that as well, that otherwise that there'd be less for Stirling to not have these things. I guess what I'm trying to say.
When's the date for the first version of the newsletter?
That'll be the
today.
3rd, yeah.
Today?
Today.
So we'll
Third of
launch
July.
it today.
Yeah, on
Great.
the 3rd of July, so we'll be launching it along. And I might give you some information about the podcast on it too, because I'll mention that too. So,
Good.
so yeah, so we'll be tying it in with our podcast, because the podcast always comes out the first week in every month. And the newsletter will be every 2 months. So there's a little bit in between, so we can just keep people up to date about maybe what's just been done, interesting things that we've been up to, interesting things that we're doing with the podcast as well, and a little bit about the people who have helped with the podcast. And obviously, the fact you have a podcasting studio here at ApartHotel can only be a great thing up at King Street. So yeah, all these things just help to work together.
You want to say something there, Tom?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's probably one of my favourite parts of the job, actually, is the fact that you're constantly meeting new people. And that might not necessarily be authors and other people involved in the book trade. It can be people in libraries, it can be people in museums, it can be people in galleries, folklorists. There are just so many people that we've met over the last 10 years. And, we really hope to not just continue to forge those relationships, but to meet entirely new people as well over the next 10 years to come.
Yeah. Well, I wish you all the best on your second decade. Stirling's lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in and telling us about it. And good luck.
Thank you very much for having us.